OODAcast, informing your decisions with intelligence, analysis, and insight. Brought to you by the team at OODAloop.com.
Hi, I'm Matt DeVoe at OODA, and thanks for joining us for another OODAcast today.
Hi, and I'm Bob Gorley. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at OODA. Today, our guest on the OODAcast is Lou Manousos, the founder and CEO of RiskIQ. Lou, how you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks for joining us. So Lou, just by way of background, why don't you give us a little bit of your origin story, kind of step us through your career and how you get to start RiskIQ?
Sure. So I'm a Midwesterner from Chicago. Been out in San Francisco now for about 20 some years. So my beginning started, I was studying physics and I was walking in the quad at the university and a professor was rollerblading by me and he said, "Hey, aren't you that physics guy that knows something about computers?" I said, "Yeah." It's like, "Yeah, we're trying to build a secure computer system at the lab." And this was Argonne Labs in the Midwest. And so they needed help, securing the network. And that's kind of what got me into cybersecurity. And I was doing, like a lot of people, this is early internet days, early 90s. I was doing a lot with Unix security and just generally as the internet was taking off. And it turned out no one at the lab really knew much about that. So that's what got me into it. And from there, I realized I was the guy running a lot of the meetings and organizing teams. If you've worked in an educational environment, a lot of individual contributors and not many good technical managers. So me and a couple other guys at the lab decided to get into the startup game. And so that's kind of what got me into doing startups. And since then I've done 4 startups. RiskIQ is my latest one. And I wanted to do something that was out in the internet. And so my last business was an identity management company, which we sold to RSA. And identity is obviously a great business, but it's a technology that has been worked on for many, many years. And where I saw the threat going was really onto the internet itself, as companies were using the internet as their primary network and they were losing visibility. And that's what got me to RiskIQ. So it's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Any leadership strategies or things that you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think for me, leadership is about enabling others. And the best way to do that is to lead by example. A good leader is a good soldier. And for my organization, I try to look for and highlight certain things. And the first thing is, I think cybersecurity is a game. It's not a problem. And we have to really understand what matters to us, our business, how we're targeted. And, finding people that like to solve puzzles, versus just solving a problem. So leadership and hiring, I think, go hand in hand to find that right person. The second thing is around people who are passionately curious about what they do and encouraging the team to express their desire to win. And if you find people who like to figure out the rules of the game, chase the bad guys, it's sort of a magical experience and can be much more fulfilled in your role if you're on the right kind of team. And that's, assembling people around that kind of core. And, when you think of hands-on leadership, you can't find another place like cybersecurity. If you're not hands-on, you're not going to understand the bad guy. And leading from an ivory tower just doesn't work. And it also just doesn't matter about your role. Even if you're a business guy in a technical field like cybersecurity, it's leading by example, and your team's going to really your team is going to appreciate this. And I think of the team that I'm on, how I encourage others is like, those are your peers and your boss. So for me as a CEO, I work for the board and I work for the shareholders. I work for my customers. Like the worst job, right? You have so many people you're working for. So that's my team. But then there's the people that I lead that are under me, and I want to make sure that they're getting the support. And especially today with this crisis, people are people, and we've got professional development and all the personal issues that the team has to go through. So it's just really, really important to understand that not only are you on a team, but you've got people under you that you have to support. So that's what it means to me.
Lou, I've also noticed on this leadership theme, you're also a community leader. You've taken on yourself to lead some interesting community-wide activities. For example, when I first met you, you were the first one that had brought this issue of malvertising to the front and helping people understand what malvertising is and how adversaries can use the infrastructure of the internet to target malicious code or take other malicious actions. And your leadership there, I'd love to hear more about what you were doing, was with the Internet Society. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we were, as we were doing a lot of research in internet security and threats and threat actors, I put up a website, malvertisements.org, and it's just to track all of these malicious ads. And so I was invited to speak. I think it was at the Pentagon, something like that, which is how we bumped into each other on the topic. And I had a presentation I did called The Perfect Weapon. And, advertisements are just designed, they're targeted, undetectable, they operate at distance, they scale crazy ways. So, so RiskIQ, we were focused on understanding the internet better and threats and threat actors that target you. And what we kept just running into is this perfect weapon, which was an ad that was being used to distribute malware and other types of threats. So from there, we ended up building the Anti-Malvertising Working Group, which just brought together different stakeholders. This was very early on, before the ad networks themselves actually took this threat seriously. I think now we're seeing a big change. I think from both the ad industry, advertisers really understand this is a serious issue. But yeah, but back then wasn't well known. And I'm a very technical person. I love this topic because it really is a great way for an adversary to gain a foothold.
Right.
Cool. Hey, on that same thematic, some of my favorite conversations between the two of us and with others have been in evil genius mode when we think about kind of the current state of the cyber threat and ways in which they might innovate in the future. I'd love to get your perspective, kind of what is your current thinking on the current state of the cyber threat, but then also how do you think they're going to innovate over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think everyone's business just went digital overnight, and that has added a new dynamic, the remote workforce and how we communicate with our customers, how every company has to communicate with customers. And you think about, losing internet access and what that might actually do, or compromising internet access right now. I mean, your business is already limited because you're remote, but if you lost the internet, you'd be in deep trouble. So I think there's a lot of attention on this problem. The threats are the same. It's just we don't have the same controls that we had in an office environment or a private network environment. So for us, it's all about discovering the unknowns and understanding what is exposed to the internet and what threats are out there now that this attack surface is everybody's personal residence. And so that it's an interesting problem, and I think we're going to see it evolve pretty rapidly over the next 2 or 3 months. Right now, like as of today, it's a lot of the same threats that we'd seen for the last couple of years, just magnified against the COVID-19 theme.
Right. And Lou, can you discuss a little bit more about that magnification and how things have changed because of COVID-19? Because there's some very despicable actors out there doing bad things right now. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so we put out some reports on this, and we can talk about that too. But generally speaking, if you look at email attack vector, the COVID scam is now the top lure. You look at domain name registrations for malicious domain names. I mean, there's thousands of new malicious domain names coming out. It is difficult to tell between the good, the bad, and the ugly, because the pandemic's only been active for the last 3 or 4 months. So, when you see new infrastructure on the internet, most security teams will flag that as suspicious, because how often do you really see new infrastructure? But right now, there's just a lot of new infrastructure. Just in the last 2 months, we have over 1 million newly observed host names that we've observed. And those, it's not that all those are bad, but you've got scams, fake stores, very vulnerable sites that are being stood up. So it really is the raw magnitude of what's there, and sorting through it is a big challenge for everyone.
Right.
How has it impacted you at RiskIQ kind of personally? Has it disrupted operations? I'm assuming, the bulk of the team in the San Francisco area, you moved to a work from home type environment. How have you and your team adapted to this, personally?
Well, we had a head start. San Francisco was one of the first cities in the United States to call a shelter order, and like everyone, we were shocked. We were even more shocked because we were the only city really getting locked down. So of course, there's a big healthy debate in the company of, what are we going to do? Are we going to call shelter orders for the entire company, or just the people located in the Bay Area? So we ended up just doing it across the board. We thought that was the right thing to do. And, in hindsight, it clearly was the right thing to do. But that gave us a healthy head start. From there, we just noticed pretty quickly that a large percentage of our staff had already been working from home, maybe a day or two a week. And so they were just adapted almost instantly. And of course, customer facing teams, people who travel often, this was not a real big deal for them. Became tougher, I think, as everyone has to deal with the family situation, and just having a private workspace in their home for an extended period of time. But I think for the most part, our staff did great, and having that head start was really, really useful. And as the shelter orders get extended, we're doing more for the staff, giving them a budget to spruce up their home office, and just encouraging people to take it easy, schedule their day properly, make sure they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Simple stuff, but it's really important as a leader that we remind everybody to pace themselves, because it's just too easy to work from 7 to 7 every day.
It's almost like going to a conference, with the 3-2-1 rule. You got to remember to get some sleep and to get some meals and to take a shower every day. I think it's important to establish that routine.
Yeah, and it's and as a cybersecurity team, there's just so much bad stuff, and adversaries are really active, and we love to hunt rabbits here. We love to chase them around, and there's just so much to do that, you can find yourself at 1 in the morning just chasing the next thing that's going on, and we that's what we are here to do. But you got to pace yourself and hand stuff off to others, and so we're working through that with the company right now. It's an interesting time.
Lou, I think that kind of advice applies to just about every corporation today in the digital world. And I think it's important. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I wanted to ask a follow-on question. You're also one of the most widely known in the cybersecurity community. I think every CISO, for the most part, knows you. And I imagine you've already had a lot of conversations with them about what they should do as their workforce has transitioned to work from home. Do you have any other advice you can share on that for those CISOs that haven't called you yet?
Yeah, life's a journey, and boy, I mean, this is an interesting stage in that journey.
It is.
And
It really is.
and so, that's been the general theme of all my conversations is, this is an interesting time, and we're gonna get through it, and it's important to work closely with your trusted circle and the partners that have been there for you over the years, right? And just we got to support each other. And I feel like that's overwhelmingly the theme that of the discussions that I'm having. And the other part is I'm hearing a lot of people have stood up pretty complex programs, and in reality, it's really simple things work. And now with everybody working from home, we're starting to see like, well, gosh, threat actors can still do their job, and how do the systems that we built adapt? And your vendors, your supply chains, we're all peers right now, and it's just super critical that we can keep the security programs operating. So yeah, my general advice is I think there's a great lesson here in terms of what we need to do. These internet-based threats are clearly difficult to stop, and now everyone's network is the internet, and that's something that I'm spending a lot of time talking to people about.
Great.
Cool. You speak of kind of community engagement. I noticed one of the things that RiskIQ started doing early was a daily intelligence report around COVID-19 that was covering not just kind of the latest statistics, but then the things that were impacting business operations. Early on, it was tracking which companies had issued a work from home order, what cities were shut down, the extent of the shutdown, that sort of stuff. Can you kind of step us through what was the catalyst for putting something like that out?
Well, yeah, I think being in the Bay Area and having the shelter order hit us early, we were getting a lot of questions from other leaders and peers and customers about what's going on in San Francisco. And so within 24 hours, we were putting that report together, and we just saw a dramatic uptick in threat infrastructure, and we saw a dramatic uptick in just misinformation. And so all the security leaders that we work with, it wasn't just about the cyber stuff. It was about regular things like, what if my team can't come to work tomorrow because they have to babysit their kids, right, or parent their children? That's going to hurt our ability to operate our security operations center. It's going to just impact our business in ways that we have never really faced. So when we did that reporting, we wanted to extend it to cover all of the more traditional physical security issues that teams are facing, as well as the cyber issues. It was a pretty easy decision for us to put the time and effort into that report. It takes us, and we publish it every day, and it's free. And with about 100,000 people in the RiskIQ community that either come in to use our products or passive total, giving this back with no expectation of anything in return was just a brain dead simple decision. And primarily my motivation was, let's fight back against these miscreants that want to take advantage of this COVID crisis. It just, that's what we need to do right now, is do everything we can to keep things running and then prevent the bad guys from disrupting our infrastructure. So that's why we did it. And yeah, it's been interesting. A lot of people get a lot of value out of the physical report as well as the cyber parts of the report.
Yeah. Excellent. It's a great resource. We'll make sure that we put a link to it in the notes as well. It is something, this is a unique issue. I mean, obviously cyber affects everybody, but the COVID-19 themed cyber attacks impacts everybody on the globe. I think some of the statistics coming out of the US government is that every single country has been targeted in some manner, with a COVID related lore. So I don't think we've ever had an issue that's brought, such common ground from a threat perspective.
Yeah, we look for a signal in the noise, and this particular signal was so strong, right? It just was astounding, from very basic scams, phishing, traditional phishing lures, all the way through malware-based attacks, ransomware. It seems to be a very quick motivator for the bad guy.
Right. Lou, I have another leadership-based question, and this whole discussion has been great advice for leaders, and I appreciate that. One segment we didn't talk much about is the board of directors of a large Fortune 1000 corporation, that kind of strategic thinker and strategic leader. Any advice for that individual on what they should be thinking about the cyber threat and how to respond to it?
Well, right now, I think today with COVID, it's maybe a little different, but your security team is needs the support of the board, and you have to have a dialogue, and that dialogue is going to bring up issues. So anytime you have good communication, you're going to hear things that might make you think, gosh, are we not that secure? And I think that's good. I would advise boards to keep pushing on their team and get uncomfortable with the news that they're hearing, because that just means that your team is finding issues, and if they're finding them, they're fixing them, and then they're learning how to respond to incidents. And that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You're going to need the ability to recover, and the board will have to understand what that means if there is a breach. So, improving communication with the security leadership is a real critical part of what I look for. And, and if I ever hear from a board member or they're asking questions, we've been briefing public boards and as well as large private boards, and just giving advice generally of what to look for. And, just really starts with getting good, solid security leadership and making sure you've got a CISO that you feel is a true executive that can communicate to you, and pretty basic stuff at the end of the day.
Right. Thanks, Lou.
Great. Obviously, you guys are providing a great source of information, but you personally, what type of sources do you revert to, to keep yourself informed and making good decisions?
So I get my data largely from the front lines, what's going on in real life every day. And so understand what the adversary is doing, look at actual attack information. And what's a little bit different about RiskIQ is we have this corpus of information that we can draw on because we operate large scale internet collection. So we'll look in our own data sets when we hear of an incident from a customer or a partner and correlate to see how serious is this issue? Is it impacting everybody, or is it just happening in one specific vertical, or is it just happening to one particular company? So for us, I think it's very important to keep alignment with what's really going on in the front lines, and then understand the scope of the attack. And as I mentioned earlier, it's like looking for the signal in the noise. And so right now, a lot of the signal that's out there is COVID-related lures. And so we're drilling in on those very deeply.
Right. Excellent. I always like to ask, you've got the physics background, obviously the technologist in cybersecurity. What types of books and things are you reading right now that we're stuck at home in quarantine?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm so there's a series of essays, a book called What If by Crawley, and it's interesting because it talks about, what if this happened, what would the result have been? And I thought with COVID, I was like, wow, this is a really great book to read, because this is the what if scenario that so many of us have been planning for our whole career. And now we've got this major incident that's affecting us. So I think everyone in the risk field, not just cybersecurity, would get a kick out of this book. It goes back to really the beginnings of recorded history, and what if what did happen didn't happen, if it went another way. And yeah, there's some interesting things in there that you can correlate to what's happening today with COVID. So what if, that would be my book and my recommendation for you guys.
Excellent. I have to check it out. I think that's one of the difficult challenges around this. Anytime you're making data-driven or model-based decisions, right? It's always difficult after the fact to say, well, what was the course of the path not taken? So those are great intellectual exercises, I think, to go through that kind of thinking, that what if thinking. Right. I also feel like that's going to be the source of, huge misinformation campaigns going into the election. It's going to be a lot of preposition and what ifs and why didn't, and that sort of stuff is going to be widely discussed over the next 6 months.
I think it's already happening. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there already. And if you're in the government field, or law enforcement, there's a lot of pressure on and even in the private sector to let's protect against these attacks. And right now, everyone wants to focus on the COVID threat, but yeah, in the fog of war, we got an election coming up. We got to stay focused on that as well. So.
Yeah. And a lot of gaps and seams, as you mentioned, just relating to everybody shifting to work from home, right? So a lot of adversaries looking to exploit that as well.
New infrastructure, right? And the reason that new infrastructure is scary is it's new and people make mistakes when they stand up new stuff. And so companies are needing to support this massive shift from an in-person environment to a completely remote environment, both for their staff, but also their customers. So there's just thousands and thousands of new things, largely in the cloud, because we can't get into the office to configure stuff. And that's a big opportunity for misconfigured systems. And then, misconfigured systems can get scanned by an adversary. If it's crimeware, then yeah, you're going to see ransomware, right? You're going to see basic attacks that try to monetize. If it's your nation state, then who knows what happens. But yeah, right now, I think keeping and discovering what's being stood up by organizations is really, really important. We want the business continuity.
Makes sense.
Right. Thanks, Lou, for the time and all these insights. This was incredibly insightful and much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Lou.
Thanks for having me.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll put links to the resources we discussed, the book and the mailing list, and also to riskiq.com itself in the show notes related to this episode. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this OODA Loop production. For the latest analysis on cybersecurity, technology, and global risks, please visit www.oodaloop.com.